This week, a highly unusual move made by the federal government. The FBI raided the home of a reporter for the Washington Post, seizing laptops, phones, and other devices as part of a leak investigation tied to classified information. Now, the journalist is not accused of any crime, but the search itself is raising some serious questions about where the line sits between national security and freedom of the press. Let's examine what's at stake with Nora Benavidez. Sorry if I butchered your last name, Nora Benavidez, the senior counsel and director of digital justice and civil rights for the advocacy group Free Press. In one sentence, why should people who are not journalists care about this case?
Well, it's highly unusual for the government to enter someone's home, regardless of whether they're a journalist, and that should concern all of us. I think also knowing that we're in a climate now where journalists are under threat from the White House. They're also under threat from Attorney General Pam Bondi. The environment around press freedom is weakening, and that should chill all of us if we're thinking about how we access information, where we're getting our news, and whether the federal government can influence how journalists do their jobs.
And so traditionally, where is the line drawn between investigating a leaker and targeting a journalist?
That's a great question. And, I think this is just as a general incident, really unusual. Government invasion into someone's home and into a reporter's home, the seizure of their journalistic materials, that is exactly the kind of scenario that our Constitution was intended and conceived of to protect. So the First Amendment should limit the ways that the government can do something like this. Not to mention, there are other federal laws on the books that would protect a journalist and their materials, like the Privacy Protection Act. So I think actually we're pretty far beyond the line of what is acceptable. Now, the government did execute a search warrant. They took a number of items, as you mentioned, but we really don't have details about what the search warrant contained. And ultimately, if there were any sources that the journalist had, those were protected materials because of their journalistic duties.
What message do you think this sends to reporters who cover national security or government accountability?
I think it sends a chilling message, obviously. Journalists like you, like others, are meant to inquire, to give communities information. That might sound corny, but that's really what the Fourth Estate was intended to do. And journalists now might think twice about whether they can pursue a source. This journalist in particular sometimes dubbed herself the federal government whisperer because she got calls day and night from people inside the federal government who wanted to talk about what was going on. And I think that reporters who are perhaps investigating or pursuing stories, trying to shed light for communities on issues, might now actually worry about the penalties if they do so. That's incredibly chilling.
So some viewers might say, hey, if national security is at stake, why shouldn't the government act? What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. We don't know a whole lot. The only element that the government has exposed about what national security threats this poses are regarding a federal government contract worker that supposedly took materials out of an office near Washington, D.C. There's very little that they have given us, and that might implicate national security. But if they've given any of those materials over to a journalist, that ultimately then is outside the bounds of what would legally protect that journalist and the journalistic activities that she engaged in. And so I think there's definitely that balance. But here, it feels like the federal government is continuing to pursue outside the bounds of the law so that they can frame whatever they see as national security.
All right, Nora Benavidez, thank you so much for kind of peeling the layers off of this very layered story for us.